No names are coming up. But somebody said when preparation meets opportunity,
That's Earl Nightingale up here on my shelf.
Is it really?
Earl Nightingale. Yeah, I promise you. In Lead the Field, he talks about that. Luck. He talks about luck. People want to be lucky, and luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And then the next sentence in that phrase is that, but an opportunity is there all the time. And I live by that, meaning opportunities are everywhere, and you're always preparing for that opportunity. But if you don't give yourself space to do that, you're going to miss it. You're not going to see it. So those of us that are quote unquote lucky are working, we're doing things like we're recording podcasts, we're getting out networking, we're doing the things required to grow ourselves. But it's when that opportunity then gets presented to us, we're in a position because of all the work that we've done to take advantage of it. Joel Solomon introduced you and me a month ago, maybe now.
Yeah.
Had I not done the work leading up into that introduction, I would not have been in the space to, number one, even be on your podcast today, or even have you on my podcast a week or two ago. My point being with that is that, so with the work that I'd done up to that point led to the opportunity, and who knows where it's going to lead.
Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Randy Wilson. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thanks, man. This is going to be a great conversation. We were just laughing before we hit record. We've got so many things in our past that align, and obviously where we're headed in the future, good things going on. So excited to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Cool. It's good to have you. Yeah, it's one of those situations where we talk so much that it's like we really should do a podcast. We really should hit record and start this thing, because we could have already had a podcast with everything we talked about. So
we were talking about 10, 15 minutes before we hit record, right? So yeah, we missed out. So sorry, folks, if we missed out on some of the good stuff. Hopefully we'll be able to catch back up and get you some more good content here coming up here soon.
We did say at one point, we're like, we should talk about that on the podcast.
We'll circle back, right? We'll circle back.
So Randy is the host of Rich Mind podcast. You are a podcaster yourself, and I may have been on one of his podcasts recently. Just like 10 days ago or something. And we had a lot of fun. I got to share my story, which is fun. And he's just an entrepreneur. He's out there doing stuff. He's in kind of a transition right now, doing some new things, trying some new things, and building stuff, trying to build stuff, starting to build stuff, and all that. So Randy, on this podcast, what we do is we have a lot of energy. I'll try to calm down. What we like to do is,
I'll try to keep up with your energy. Let's go.
But what we do on this podcast, when you're first time you're on, especially, we like to dig into your story a little bit, learn the origin story, how you ended up being this amazing person you are today in the world, doing amazing things, helping people, and talking to us today, and what that journey looks like, how you got into entrepreneurship, what led up to that, what were you doing before, what inspired you, and what inspires you today, I guess. And with that, I just hand it right over to you, and you can tell your story.
Let's go
for it.
Yeah, let's see what happens. So yeah, if as I get into it, if you have questions about any part of it, don't hesitate to ask. I'll try to keep it like the 30,000 foot level, and obviously we can go as deep as you'd like. But as you mentioned, my name is Randy Wilson. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where I currently live. I'm a Hoosier native, been here my entire life. So Midwest, born and raised. It's been a good life. No major complaints. Family life growing up was great. Wasn't great in school. So a lot of the theme for myself is I'm self-taught. So I'm not necessarily a great reader, but I have learned as I've gotten older as far as consuming content. I love learning, which is ironic because through the school system, I absolutely hated it. So with that said, I had the opportunity to go to college, local college, and at Ball State University, which is in Muncie, Indiana, which is where I grew up, and didn't do well, as you can imagine. Wasn't actually getting the grades I needed. Met my wife, current wife, married, going on 28 years now.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But met her there. That was the best thing that came out of going to college. But with the bad experience as far as the grades, we both decided to drop out and start a life together. Yeah, both of us. So she was smarter as far as the IQ level of between the two of us. But yeah, I can't say that was probably the smartest decision.
At least that's what you say. That's what you tell her.
Yeah. So well, I tell her all the time. She's like the smartest woman I know. Yeah, it's not me. So we dropped out together, started life, got married in our early 20s, started having children right away. I've got a son, he's 26 now, a daughter that is 24, and another daughter that's 22. And they're all in that phase of life where they're trying to figure it out just like I was back then. Once again, which is why a lot of the passion with the Rich Mind podcast and things that I produce as far as content is really centered towards that age range, that mid-20s to early 30s. Because I can just remember that in that time frame for myself, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have mentors to pour into me. My father was a good man. He just didn't necessarily give me the tools I needed to succeed. But one tool he did give me, which is a big part of my life, was the work ethic. His philosophy was to go to work for a company, basically devote your entire life to that company, and at the end of the day, you would get this magical retirement. I mean, the standard way of life that I think a lot of folks live, even still to this day. I usually equate it to being like the Midwest mindset. I mean, it's just a lot of the folks I know. Yeah. And it's just kind of, that's what you're brought up to believe. And I believed it too. I was working for a local regional grocery chain through high school into college. When I dropped out of college, I went to work full time into this grocery chain. Made it all the way up to the store management. I worked my tail off. I mean, I was working all the time. To say that I wasn't around when my kids were in that early stages is a very accurate statement. I was just working. I was grinding. So we made a decision that my wife was going to stay home with the kids while I just went out and worked. That was just the agreement that we made. And it served us well, meaning I knew the kids were taken care of, but I wasn't necessarily as engaged with them as I really wanted. So fast forward a little bit, I made it up into the store management, and about 30 years old, 31, 32 for myself. I'm kind of dating myself here. We can get into maybe our ages. We'll see if I get that far. But anyways, I'm about to turn 50 this year, if this puts a little context in it. So this is a little while ago. So into my 30s, I got my store as a store manager, which is that was my goal. Working, grinding, sacrificing, doing all the stuff the company wanted me to do. And I got to the goal. Here's the problem, is that the store that I had opened wasn't doing very well. It wasn't, this was back in 2006, 7, 8. So back when the recession was about to happen, things weren't going well back in the economy back then. And the company I worked for made the decision to shut my store down unannounced, meaning, so as I mentioned, my blood, sweat, and tears were poured into this store, right? I mean, it was my life. I lived it 24/7, 365. And one morning, I'll never forget, my supervisor came in it was a Tuesday morning. I'll never forget it. And it was an early morning visit, and he never visits early, ever. Like, he would always come in the afternoon. He always told me he did that because he always wanted to end his day on a high note. Because I was, like I said, I was just like the model employee. I always did what I felt like was pretty good. He never had to discipline me or anything like that. But for him to show up early in the morning that day was like, I was like, uh-oh, something's going. Either I thought I did something wrong. I was like, automatically in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, what'd I do? What happened? He's like, Mr. Wilson, we need to chat. And I was like, yeah, I need to finish up a couple of things. Can we just a couple minutes? Yeah, I'll head to your office. Just come on over when you're ready. So I did what I needed to do, went into the office, and he slammed this big heavy door behind him and scared the crap out of me.
Jeez.
Because like I said, I thought I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what was going on. But he informed me at that moment that the company had decided that they were going to close my store. That obviously was a problem. And I knew it wasn't profitable. I could, I had the P&Ls of the company and that kind of stuff. I didn't probably have all the details, but I had enough information to know that it wasn't doing very well. So it was just a slap in the face, meaning I realized at that moment that I was not in control of my life.
Right.
I was like, what? How in the world did this happen? I'm going down this road of family, work hard, doing what everybody's told me to do, doing what I felt like was a good job and a good work, right? The product I was producing, the building, the facility, the employees even. We were talking about that before we hit record too, as far as how I would, function, managing folks and just doing all the good things that I thought was right. And to be basically have it pulled right out from underneath me was a huge wake up call. And as I mentioned, this was like the 2007, 2008 timeframe for me. I didn't know what to do. The people that I wanted to confide in, which was my father, he didn't have good answers for me, meaning he'd led me to this point then that wasn't working. And so I didn't know what to do. And so the first thing that came to my mind is I just need to get some more different information. This is prior to the tech today that we know of as far as like podcasts. I mean, information, the YouTube was even around. I don't believe it back then, or at least if it wasn't to the robust amount that it is today. But my point being is I didn't know where to go to get information. And the only thing I could think of to do was to go to the local library. And that's what I did. And I went to the local library. I actually have the book up here on my shelf. It's the Retire Young, Retire Rich book by Robert Kiyosaki. It's the book that jumped off the shelf at me. And I didn't, once again, I'm searching. It's like, I got to figure out what to do. This is not right. And so I checked out the book and I went home and I started devouring that book. And he started talking about things I had never heard of. Income statements, balance sheets, good debt, bad debt, all the stuff that as business owners and entrepreneurs that we probably take for granted today because of information that we knew. At that point in my life, I had never heard of any of those things. And it was an aha, like expression of just joy that, wow, I found exactly where I need to go. But then it also created a bunch of frustration in my life too. Cause I was frustrated that no one had ever showed me any of this before in my life. So I really resented my father for the longest time. It took me a long time to really get over that. And that's kind of the end part of the story. But inside of that book, he referred to, and I also had that up on my shelf as well, the Lead the Field program of Earl Nightingale. So personal development. So once again, I was never exposed to those things as a child. And when inside of the book of the Retire Young, Retire Rich book, he talked about how Lead the Field of Earl Nightingale's was his springboard into more success. And I went out and bought this. It's a CD program. This is the original box up here on my shelf. If you're watching this on video of me buying that program back then. And I'll tell you that was the beginning of a journey that has led me so far, and it continues to lead me so far to, like I said, I stepped out on my own, started, e-commerce was probably the most success I had, Amazon e-commerce, through the pandemic, basically coming out of the pandemic, it kind of waffled on me and I made some decisions, but, and then just trying to figure out launching the podcast here in the last few months or this last year, 2023 is when I launched the podcast, trying to figure out what the next phase is going to be. But the big part of the story was that resentment that I had for my dad is I realized that later on is he didn't know either. He didn't know to share it with me. Yeah. And so once again, that's where a big passion. No, I thought he was keeping it from you or he wasn't giving me all the nuggets of wisdom, right? And it's like he didn't know either. I learned that through conversations that we would have later on, that it's not that because he was devouring it. As I was discovering it and sharing it, he was devouring it as well because it was like new stuff to him. Yeah. And so I quickly realized that it wasn't necessarily somebody trying to hold me back. It just was lack of information, lack of knowledge. So that's where now, that's what I'm trying to like shout from the rooftops, the things that I'm learning, right? Getting on podcasts such as this, or even when I'm interviewing folks like you for my podcast to try to broaden the ideas and the really what reality really could be just with some basic information. And so that's kind of what I kind of stick in that lane of, the financial education, personal development, and what that can really mean for somebody if they really take hold and take charge of their own life.
And we put a period right after that. That is a great story. I love it.
So as I mentioned, that was kind of, I left out a lot of things in there, right? So feel free if you have questions. But yeah, that was kind of the roundabout of discovery, right?
I got lots of questions. I have so much I could unpack here. I'm sitting here, right, because I'll write over here, a little bit, okay, yeah, I should circle back to that. That's an interesting thing to go into. So let's go into some of that. Let's actually circle back a little bit. Well, there's a theme, there's a thread through this whole thing that, and I love, this is a great theme maybe for this part of the conversation, is self-education. And I think, well, number one, you are not alone I did poorly in school, but I became an entrepreneur. I think even Gary Vee talks a lot about this. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vee. Few people are.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
But if you follow him at all, I don't follow him, like daily or anything, but I have consumed quite a bit of his content over time. One of the big things he talks about all the time is how bad he did in school and how it sucked. But he found his way. I mean, obviously he's very, very successful today, so that really doesn't mean anything, in terms of, especially in the context of actually going into business or doing something with your life and being successful. The education is good. And for certain professions, you got to have it, but it's not for everybody. And there's different paths for all of us. But I think one of the things that especially stood out with your story, Randy, is that you at some point figured out that, the library is a good thing. And you were motivated to go out and find the answers. I did very similar things. I remember in the early 90s, I was struggling a little bit financially, and that's a whole story. But there, I went to actually a bookstore, and on that shelf was this golden book called Think and Grow Rich. This is like 91, 92. This was a long time ago. So I'm 53, so I'm ancient. But that was and I read that book probably a dozen times over the next decade. But that was one of those things too. Like, I had a father like your father. It sounds like we're very similar. We're both from the Midwest. Maybe that has something to do with it. But my dad worked for John Deere for over 30 years. Well, about 30 years, 31 years, somewhere in there. Worked his way up through that. He was like working by the end, he was working with computers and these giant measuring machines that would measure things by the millionth of an inch. I would hear all about it in those days because he loved what he did. But he had kind of a little bit of entrepreneur spirit in him. After that, when he retired, he actually started a computer repair business for like 20 years, did that. But at the same time, it was like, that was what was instilled. I'm like, wow, this is how, you find a job and you stick with that job over, 30 years, retire, and that's life. But it's not necessarily life for all of us. That's not all our paths. And especially today, it's a lot harder. I think it is harder to find those jobs, or people job hop a lot more these days. And unfortunately, the other thing that came out of this story, I'm just going to keep talking because there's a lot. Like I said, the other thing that came out of this story, what's really interesting to me, is a thing that probably a lot of people on this podcast or listening to this podcast can relate to is, when you're don't have control. When you lost your job, here you have you've tied your identity to this thing. You love it. You're passionate about it. You work really hard to get to where you are, and then somebody just pulls out the rug. And somebody in management wasn't doing their job, and they, everything went down the toilet, and the people that work there suffer, and now have to go out and find their way. Sometimes, in hindsight, you look at those things and you're glad that happened because now, you're in a better place. But I had that happen when I was working at a company for a number of years as a web developer, and I worked really hard, built a team, built this suite of products, marketplace. My blood, sweat, and tears in this. I was so proud of it. And then they got out of the WordPress business, and I was out of a job. So it was the same. I can relate to that feeling of frustration. Like, what just happened? Like, now what do I do? But yeah, so going back to that, so how you how did you kind of cope with that? Was that the spark that where you went out and you're like, well, I need to find control, like take control of my life and maybe educate myself, and you just went to the library looking for. Did you go to the library just looking for answers? Were you just like randomly or was there a specific thing you were looking for when you went there? Now today it would be Google,
No.
but back in
library days. You're right. I did. Meaning, so it's control. I love that word. That's the word I use, and it's control of your money and your mind, right? So that's where the rich mind. That's where the title of the podcast came from. So it's just basic information. It's not. I know some in-depth concepts and things, right? You can talk about raising capital. And I mean, I can talk about those things. I can have conversations, but on my podcast, I don't go there. I just talk about basic stuff, but it's control. I promised myself back then when that happened, because I had a young family. My kids were just barely into school, like maybe getting into elementary. I don't remember exactly. I could probably do the math in my head, which I won't do right now, but they were young. I had a young family, and I promised myself that I would never allow or have myself in a position where I had basically all my eggs in one basket, and then I wasn't in charge of that basket. So yes, when I went to the library, I honestly, because like I said, that was part of my story. I don't know if you caught that. I don't read very well. So for me to be in a library was like, what in the world am I doing? But I couldn't think of anywhere else to go. And so I'm standing in there and I'm looking around. Obviously you've got these big bookshelves and it's just a building, right? To me, with a bunch of books. And the only thing I could think of is the personal finance section. So that's where I went. That's where I started. And I stood in front of this huge bookshelf with hundreds, if not thousands of books staring right back at me. And so I'm looking at obviously the edges of all the books. And this book, that's where literally it jumped off the shelf at me, because that's exactly where I was at that moment. That's exactly the ideas that I was trying to find. There were others there that I've gone back. It's like Think and Grow Rich. I was referring and reading through Think and Grow Rich yesterday, to be honest with you. I was just going through a couple of the chapters. I don't usually read it from cover to cover when I'm reading it now, because I have done that a few times. I'll just kind of refer back to the different chapters as needed.
Yeah.
But that was in that section as well, or close by. But yes, to answer your question, it was all about control. And it was, how do I get control? I think that folks, in my opinion, this is where becomes my opinion. And this is just from my experience, especially with my kids. I kind of use my kids as guinea pigs, right? So I'm trying to hear what they're doing, or obviously I'm trying to persuade and help them, right, with their life. But then I'm hearing about what their friends are doing as well. And they feel like they're not in control of their day-to-day activities. They feel like they can't do certain things, whether it's financially or with a job or even with a relationship or something like that. And my argument is that if it's the self-education piece, right? It's the taking the time to consume real quality, right? Some folks that have done it, right? So for example, you, Matt, I mean, if someone wants to learn how to build websites and do the websites and build teams, right? International teams, and you're the guy. And there are other folks out there that are doing similar things with whatever topic they want to learn about. And that's where today, with the information that being so prevalent, I mean, you can really learn, in that self-education can really get put on autopilot, which is exactly what I've done. So from that moment of not knowing anything, literally nothing other than work, grind, to where I've gotten myself today. As I've said, I'm not a gazillionaire by any means, but I'm comfortable and I'm doing well, and I'm allowed myself to pivot. I can change. So I mentioned the Amazon e-commerce business that wasn't necessarily doing as well as I needed to or wanted it to coming out of the pandemic because of all the supply stuff, if you can imagine. I made the decision to pivot. And so that's where my wife and I have changed, going down a different road. Now, had I not had control because of the self-education I'd done up to this point, I would not have been able to do that, if that makes any sense. So it's just a continuous journey. And that's what I love about it. And so now I'm trying to obviously give back as much as I possibly can and love conversations just like this. This is where it's so much fun.
It's amazing. Well, so you said you struggled reading. You just what was that?
I've never been diagnosed with anything, but at the same time, I just struggle looking at words on a page. I'm I mean, it could be dyslexia. I don't know what it is. I've never, like I said, I've never been diagnosed with anything. I just don't read well. It's frustrating because you hear all the time, if readers are leaders and just all that normal stuff that, you know, people are trying to tell you that you've got to read to succeed. And I'll tell you that. So the audio content is what saved me. So I can listen to anything at 2 times speed. So when I listen back to this interview, I'm going to hear myself sound like a chipmunk because I consume everything at 2 times speed. But I can pick up things. I can do that, and I've trained my brain well enough that I can do that with anybody at any time. And so I can pound through content like there's no tomorrow. So I mentioned I was listening or referring back to Think and Grow Rich. I was doing it through the audio version, right? Audible.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes I'll read to myself, like I'll have the book, and so the audio program's reading to me, but I just struggle with sitting down with a book and reading. And it's just always have been that way. And instead of fighting it, I just have learned that I can just audio, whether it's a podcast or YouTube, and pick up the same amount or, you know, good quality content, and then I can consume and then go put it to work. Cause that's the point is you consume it, but then you have to put it into action. So that's been my success so far.
You found your route. You should get that diagnosed though. You should figure out what's going on with you. Just, you know, maybe somebody has like a trick, like do this thing and you'll have an easier time. Now, but I think it's great you found your route though, that because that's what's amazing today, especially with Google and YouTube and just in podcasts with audio and there's just so many different options. And to, you know, you got to do what works for you. I mean, I know some people, like I like audio books and stuff. I just feel like partly because I'm busy and I like it that I can do other things because I like to do other stuff while I listen to it, or driving or whatever. If I'm going somewhere, I put the audiobook on. But that's a great way to consume, but having multiple options is awesome. So the other thing that kind of jumped out at me here, and this is, I think, so we're talking to people that maybe there's somebody that we're talking to here that's listening to this podcast. They hear this, well, I should go self-educate. And it seems like through our conversations, I feel like we have a lot in common in certain areas. I feel like we have some like in common touch points in our lives. But one of the things that, so when I talked about going to that bookstore, I didn't know what I was looking for. And I loved the library too. Back in the 90s, I spent a lot of time back before the internet. Spent a lot of time going to the library. Here in Milwaukee, they got a big library. I go in there and just look at like wow, where do I start? But I think the interesting thing here is, I think it would, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of, somebody kind of trying to find their way and like maybe first hearing about the self-education thing. Maybe they've tried self-education. Maybe they've tried self-help. Maybe they're kind of lost. Like, where do I start? And it sounds like you and me are similar in that we just went there. And it's like you kind of let the universe and where you are today, whatever is imprinted on you, whatever you're going through right now, and you just start reading those titles, and when you see the one, it'll speak to you. It'll just, and maybe there's something spiritual about this. This effort is because there isn't. I don't think there's so many books. Like you said, there's hundreds of books on finance or whatever, but not everyone's for you. But you'll see it. You'll pick it up. Maybe you look at the back of the cover. Maybe you just, go through it a little bit. Well, if you're working with physical, or you go online or wherever, you look at if it's audio, if you're doing audiobooks, you read the descriptions, and maybe you get a few. If you're on Kindle, you go through, that sample. I do that a lot. I sample, read the first part of a chapter or something. But it'll speak to you. And so to do it, like anything else, you have to take action. Just get out there and do it. And because you like motivation, like anything, it's not just going to come to you. you got to go to it, right? You agree with that?
Absolutely. I do. It all starts, and here's a couple words. I've got a question and a word I want to share with everybody. The word is desire, and the question is, so when I ask you this, you need to really sit with this, because I sit with this all the time. But the question is, what do you really want? That by far has been the most difficult question for myself that I ask myself continuously on an ongoing basis, is what do I truly, really want? Not what do I think that I can have? What is it? It's not what do somebody else think that I can have? It's like, what do I really want? So at that moment, when I had that traumatic experience, what I wanted was freedom. I wanted control. I couldn't necessarily put it into words back in the day, but I was like, I'm not ever going to allow this to ever to happen again.
Yeah.
So that, like you said, so then my intuition kicked in, and I saw something on a shelf that spoke to me, that started me down a path that I didn't necessarily need to know all the steps. Once you make the decision or have the desire, you will then start to get things showing up in your awarenesses, right? So whether it's a book, whether it's an audio program, whether it's a podcast, whether it's another mentor, right? Or something like that. It can be something. But if you're not sure what you truly want, those things will just come and go. They'll come into your experience and they'll float right by. And you won't even recognize that they're there. Taking the time and going through that thought experiment of what you truly want, and then having that desire and allowing yourself to have it. So here's another piece. And I actually just did a recording for my podcast, and I just launched it before we jumped on this today. And this is a real life experiment that I'm going through, and hopefully this will be valuable. And if you want to chime in, feel free. But it's living life from your past experiences, and how when you do that, so what's happened for me in just the last few weeks, I've had an opportunity show up in my experience. Like I've had an opportunity be presented to me. Now my instinct is to automatically just compare it to my past experience, start thinking why I shouldn't, why I can't, not necessarily allowing myself to believe that not only is this experience or this opportunity fantastic and it's exactly what I want, but I start forecasting a negative outcome that isn't necessarily true. Mm. And so when I do that, I've learned, or I'm learning, that being present, knowing exactly what I want, and not allowing those past experiences, right? Those past negative beliefs, those past things that are in my awareness, controlling what I do today, which is then going to impact my future results. That's what I'm working on a continuous basis. And it starts with that question: what do I truly want? And having that desire and allowing myself to have that without worrying about it. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter. It's because it's what I want at this moment.
And that desire is really cornerstone of this whole thing. Like you said, you have to want it, and you have to make the decision. I was just watching a podcast, completely random, have no idea which one it was. I saw YouTube. I'm not good with remembering names always. But he was talking. There was a guy who was clearly a bodybuilder, and he was talking about going to the gym and that motivation to go to the gym. And he's like, if you don't have a reason to go, if you don't have a desire, like the people that are there multiple times a week doing their thing, it's not hard for them. They want to be there. They're like excited to be there. They can't wait to be there. But they have something that you might not have, where it's like, I don't have a really good reason to do it, but I think I'm supposed to be, and maybe I'll feel better, but you don't have it very dialed in, like exactly why. And I think it's the same way with any part of your life. That's why I'm mentioning that. I think, like the gym, like you have to want to improve your finances. You have to want more control. You have to want to build something, because we're on the builders. You have to want to build something. You want to do something. You have to find a passion. That's why it's good. I think you have to find, that thing you're passionate about. And you want to show up. Wake up every day and be excited about it. And it may take time to find that thing.
It may take time. And that's where let me chime in on that real quick. So the entire year of 2023, I've been in a pause. I've been, exited the e-commerce space in late 2022, made some transitions and things in my life. That way the control piece wasn't out of control by any means. But with that said, instead of jumping into the next thing, whatever the next thing was, I kept asking myself that question: what do I want?
Yeah.
And I couldn't come up with an answer. I didn't have an answer. And so I allowed myself to sit with just being patient and not jumping into the next opportunity, because opportunities are everywhere. And I would assume you'd probably agree with that, right? If there's opportunities to do things, but I was focusing on being present with myself and allowing myself to allow these opportunities to come. And when the right opportunity does show up, I'll be ready to jump in 100%, like a committed decision that there's no looking back. So I allowed myself that space in 2023. And because of that, I launched the podcast. I was keeping busy doing things that I enjoy. So I've committed to doing the podcast, and I've been showing up either 3 or 2 times a week for nearly a year. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a ton of great guests. Like you said, you were on there just a week or so ago. It's been a ton of fun, but I haven't found that next business that I want to pursue, or that next opportunity that I wanted to pursue. And it has, so fast forward now, the opportunity that it's shown up. It's shown up in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yay.
Yeah. That I would not have been prepared to jump in had I not given myself that. If I would have been busy just doing, but I understand we've got to pay the bills, right? But if I was doing something that wasn't necessarily in alignment with what I wanted, then I'd been going down the wrong path, and I would have missed this opportunity that's starting to be presented in my awareness now. So those are the thought experiments that I'm going through as we speak. And so that's been my experience, is that when you allow yourself, have the desire, what do you truly want? Mm-hmm. And then really start just allowing yourself to see different things, hear different things, turn off all the negative stuff that's going on out there in the world. I mean, you just have to shut it off. You got to turn it off, get away from it, and then just start stepping into who it is that you truly want to be. Start taking some action. As I mentioned, launching the podcast. People will think, I don't know what to say on a podcast. Who am I to jump on a podcast and do a podcast or record on video, right? Because I do video as well. And it's like, you just do it. You make a decision, you commit to it, and you go all in. And for me, it's been fun. I would assume that it might be fun for other people as well. It's definitely been a creative outlet for myself. So anyways, just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you were saying there for sure.
Yeah, no, that is, so opportunity. I was thinking of a saying, and I was trying to figure out who said it, because I wanted to give them credit, but I haven't. So I did a quick Google to my right here, and no names are coming up. But somebody said, when preparation meets opportunity,
that's Earl Nightingale up here on my shelf.
Is it really?
Earl Nightingale. Yeah, I promise you. In Lead the Field, he talks about that. Luck. He talks about luck. People want to be lucky, and luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And then the next sentence in that phrase is that, but an opportunity is there all the time. And I live by that, meaning opportunities are everywhere, and you're always preparing for that opportunity. But if you don't give yourself space to do that, you're going to miss it. You're not going to see it. So those of us that are quote unquote lucky are working, we're doing things like we're recording podcasts, we're getting out networking, we're doing the things required to grow ourselves. But it's when that opportunity then gets presented to us, we're in a position, because of all the work that we've done, to take advantage of it. Joel Solomon introduced you and me a month ago, maybe now.
Yeah.
Had I not done the work leading up into that introduction, I would not have been in the space to, number one, even be on your podcast today, or even have you on my podcast a week or two ago. My point being with that is that, so with the work that I'd done up to that point led to the opportunity, and who knows where it's going to lead. But yeah, so to answer your question, yeah, Earl Nightingale, Lead the Field. Folks, if you haven't heard it, get it. It's a audio program. You can get it on Audible or different MP3 downloads. I've got mine in CD form.
Nice.
But he talks about when luck is when opportunity, or when preparedness meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And opportunity is there all the time. So I got excited because I just love that. That's cool.
See, we're aligning again. Look at us.
Yeah, I love it.
I need you around, though, to remind me of who said things.
Well, so I've got a lot of information rumbling around. Like I said, I've consumed so much content. My head, you would think it'd be like 3 or 4 or 5 times bigger than it is, but it's really not.
But I think that is, it's such a great quote, because you can be in a space, and we all are going to be, throughout my decades, there's been times where I've been down on my luck, and what I did in those in that time is find my way through it by preparing, by consuming, by learning, by going, seeking out, and thinking through what I'm doing, and then identifying a goal, and then making the decision. And that's the other part of this too, is the decision. So when I look at my agency, we're in year 6. We're still going strong. But when I look at why I'm here, it's because, number one, I was prepared for that moment. I had spent the previous years learning my craft and getting the experience and networking and doing what and so I was prepared. And it was something that I enjoyed doing, and I knew that there was opportunity there because other people are building sites and making money. There's obviously there's a lot of agencies, there's a lot of freelancers doing stuff, building stuff, and I have a lot to bring to the table. But the reason why I'm still here, the real reason, is because I made a decision and a commitment to do it. I didn't let the voices tell me, look at all my past failures and be like, I don't know, Matt, if you're up for this, you're probably going to just end up failing. Don't even try. I didn't listen to that. I just buckled down, shouted from the rooftops, this is what I do now. Everybody, if you need web design work. And then I started building, and it was not easy. It was work, building a business is work, but I just showed up every day. Where's the next project? Work on that project, and my first hire, and then building my team, and then, partnerships and podcasts and the podcast. That was a commitment as well. I surprised myself. I literally have recorded and posted a podcast once a week for over 3 years. That's crazy. I didn't even take a week off in between. And
so what you're referring to in this is another part of the equation of success, in my opinion, based on the education I've done, self-education for myself. It's called discipline.
Discipline.
You've had the discipline. To continue. You might pivot. In our discussion on our interview, which I would recommend folks to go find because it was a great discussion, we talked about pivots, and pivots aren't an uproot, right? They're just a slight change. You can be mobile in your dedicated decision, but it's having the discipline to show up every week for your team, for your podcast. That's the difference. People can get to that decision. They can have the desire, they can get to the decision, but if they're not disciplined to go through it when it's not fun anymore. I've had times when I've over the year, almost a year that I've done my podcast, I've had times where it's like, I really don't want to do it, but it's no. So this is the dialogue in my head. It's like, no, I've decided I'm going to show up every week. And yes, will it be the best podcast in the history of podcast? Probably not. But it's the discipline to still go through the motion that keeps that momentum. You start to build momentum, which you can't see where that outcome is going to be. But that's when you start to have some excitement show up in your life, is when you can stay disciplined in the action of the day-to-day activities.
You are so right. That is a really, really good point. Yeah. that kind of go hand in hand. The decision and focus on that one thing, or that, that path, that roadmap you've created for yourself, and then the discipline to show up. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down. They don't think, because it is hard. And that's why I think a lot of people struggle building a business. It is hard. And it is, don't let anybody tell you, oh, it's easy. You can go out and make $1 million tomorrow. Come on, you can do it.
Right.
I don't know where I almost had a voice I was doing for a second there. But come on, I don't know if I was going Italian. I don't know what I was doing.
Don't know what that was.
But for, and this is on a macro level, it's on a micro level, it's everything in between. It's showing up and having that large goal you're going for, and every day. And then like the weekly stuff, like doing the podcast, editing a podcast every week and getting it published on Mondays. But it's also the daily. And the daily is sometimes where the grind is. And I know in my type of business, my agency, I manage a team, projects, clients, and I have every single day, I have dozens of tasks I got to follow up on, questions I got to answer. I have to communicate, things to the client. They're communicating things to me. I'm assigning that work. That's where I am. I'm still kind of on and in the business, that because I choose to be at this point. Maybe I don't have a choice. I'm not sure, but I'm building it still. Right. So, but there are days when it's like, I look at that list, I'm like, man, I really don't feel like doing it. So the way I do it is the discipline. It's okay. Well, looking at it can be overwhelming, but then breaking it down. This is maybe a whole nother discussion. Breaking it down into smaller, just take that one, get that one out of there, do what you got to do, go to the next one. And before you know it, they're gone. Or they're, snooze tomorrow. But, but I think, yeah, that discipline of doing that though, that's so critical. That's a really, really good point you have there. Yeah.
So smaller chunks, I like that.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I've been working on this now for a long time, and like you said, it's not easy. Building a business is not easy. Personal, self-education, personal development, that's not easy either. I tell folks all the time, especially even on my podcast, that it's the hardest work I've ever done in my entire life is basically turning the camera back on myself and really going deep, trying to figure out the thoughts and what's really keeping me from moving forward the way I feel like I should. So we're in this whole social media, everybody's showing their front of, it's like everybody shows off their front of stage, which always looks great and everything's hunky-dory and all, but they never show you the back part, right? The backstage, which is the stuff you're talking about. It's the mundane grind of the daily activities that you need to do and all the stuff that you need to organize and just all of the stuff that goes along with life. The point is that we all have it. Once you have that desire and you have that dedicated decision, and it's something that you truly want, that's the key. It's got to be something you truly want. You will then have the discipline to keep moving forward, even when you don't really feel like doing it, because you've got a bigger vision for yourself or your family. But the point is that vision is what's going to keep pulling you forward. And then the opportunities, when they show up, you'll be ready to take advantage of them. So that's where I've given myself my space, to do that, knowing that I could have easily jumped into another business, right? You can always start. Businesses are not necessarily hard to start, right? You come up with an idea, you start putting it out there that you're doing it. You can obviously collect for it. It's not very hard to do. The point being is that I make that sound simple, and it's not, but it's easy to get into business for yourself. But if it's the wrong business, because of the desire piece, you're going to be swimming uphill to the point where you're not going to be going in the direction that you need to be going. And so that's been my story. And I try to share those things along my journey in hopes that it might resonate with folks to be helpful. It's almost like it's therapy for myself, trying to express my thoughts and my feelings in a way that hopefully will resonate with folks. So it's definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, so preparation, making the decision, the discipline, And well, see how I'm pulling this all together for us here? And then the vision.
So I have a little bit of
you said vision.
I have a framework for you. If you want to dive into I've got a little bit of a framework, right? So this is what I've learned. If I can put something in with a little bit of a framework, a vision of it, right? So just picture this. And these are words that they all start with D. Okay. And it's very simple. It starts with the desire, right? What do I truly want? Okay. You make a dedicated decision that you're going to go after that desire. You have the decision, or you have the dedicated decision, right? I said that already, but then you have the discipline to keep moving forward. And then once you do all that process, you're going to then deliver. It's going to be delivered to you, right? And then you just rinse and repeat. So it starts with it starts with the desire, moving into the dedicated decision. But once you make that decision, you have to then do the process, the action piece, have the discipline. And then that's when the goal, or whatever it is, this vision that you have for yourself, will begin to show itself in your experience. That's been a little bit of a framework that I've developed for myself that I try to share with other people as well. Hopefully that, I might have fumbled through that a couple times. I apologize, but at the same time, hopefully that was valuable.
It's a podcast. You can fumble on a podcast. This isn't like
I fumble on my own podcast. I guess I can fumble on yours too.
We're here to be real and human.
Yeah, there you go. I'm human. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm just trying to help folks as much as I can.
No, it's fantastic, and and it's good to have a framework like that, something to refer to, and because and all those pieces are important. And I talk about like, and it's probably same for you. You have those days where it is a struggle. It is difficult, but then when you get through it, you feel good about it. You feel good about what you did, and you feel good that you did show up, because that. You think about one of the little tricks I do for myself is I think, when I look back at this day 3 months from now, what would I have liked myself to have done? Did I benefit from goofing off that day? Or did I benefit from getting the work done and I'm in a better place 3 months later? And I talked about vision because I think that too, and Joel Solomon and it talks a lot about vision and stuff, and that's all of that with the the desire and all that kind of comes together, because you're going, no matter what you do, whether it's a business or whatever type of business you're in, if it's an agency or whatever it is, it's going to be hard work, but those are the glue is to keep you on target and keep you going and doing your thing, is to have that passion, have that desire, and then have a vision. And like, are you playing the infinite game where you want to do this, you want to show up, and you're doing something for a larger cause down the road? What is your cause? What are you? Because that is like, when I'm building this agency for a reason. I have a vision. Like I'm maybe because we can talk all day, but maybe we'll land on this. How do you think about, like, in your business, thinking about what you're doing right now, and you have the podcast, and you love sharing and you love helping, you have other things going on, things are developing for you. What is that vision? What is that thing that really drives you?
So I've recently become a grandpa. I've got a grandson now. He showed up for us in early October of 2023. He's getting ready to approach 5 months old. Depending, obviously, when you're listening to this, he could be, who knows? But the point is that it could be. But the point is that he is why, and I've known this for a long time. So it's not necessarily him. His name is Rowan. It's not necessarily because of Rowan,
Hi,
but
Rowan.
it was the legacy
Rowan,
that I
if you're
want.
watching this, sorry.
In the future. But that's the whole point. That's the whole point, is that when I'm speaking on camera, when I'm having these conversations, I want him in my family, or anybody, that's who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to future generations that it's the things that I'm learning. So that's why I try to put in there, like, my own stories. It's like real life experiences that I'm experiencing in real time. And I try to convey that in a way that hopefully, I hope, you never know, but I hope that they will hear it in the future, internalize it, but then do something different. Better is probably not the right word, but just have an opportunity to realize that they do have choice. They have control. That's what I'm doing it for. So of course, do I want to, reach the masses and help people? Absolutely. But ultimately, the Rich Mind and the Rich Mind brand and anything that I produce in my businesses and all that is for those future generations. I don't want him or my son or anybody like that to have that resentment that I had for my father because I thought he was holding it from me.
Yeah.
When in fact he wasn't, because he didn't know either. So I'm trying to, as I learn, and as I don't want to proclaim that I'm like the smartest guy in the whole wide world. I have everything figured out, because I absolutely do not. But I will say that I'm an avid learner. I'm an avid applier, meaning as I'm learning, I'm applying, and I get results. And then I try to report back on what those results are. Some of them are good. Some of them aren't so good. But it's that future generation. So if I can help that 20 to 30-year-old male or female, that they've gotten to that point in their life and they're like, man, this isn't what I thought it was supposed to be, which is exactly where I was at that exact point. I would hope, and that's what I'm hoping for, is that my message will be something that will be more of an encouragement, right? More of, there is a different way. And if you look at things a little bit differently, right? Go down the path of that self-education, that personal development, that a brand new life can be birthed from that, right? Which is exactly what's happened to me, which is the only reason why I'm talking to you today, which is the only reason why I'm trying to do the things that I'm doing out in the world. I just want to encourage folks that if I can do it, a small guy from the Midwest that didn't know anything from anybody, right? Indiana, what are we known for? Corn and basketball, and that's it, right? That's it. You think every time I go speak to somebody, they're like, "Where are you from?" Indiana. You're from Indiana?
What are they, like, what's in Indiana?
I'm from Indiana. Yeah, what's in Indiana? There isn't much in Indiana, and I'd be the first to admit that. So if a guy from Indiana that is 100% self-taught, hasn't had really many mentors in my close proximity, I haven't had the rich uncle, or I haven't had the father that really sat me down and taught me the rules of life and all that good stuff. If I can help convey things in a way that will help some folks, that's what I'm doing it for. So I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, I really hope to help folks, and that's really what I want to do it for.
I love it. Yeah, and that's why I love podcasts, the podcast format. And you're doing the same thing. We share stories, and we're not going to relate to everybody, but that's the key though, is we're going to relate to somebody. Somebody out there is going to have the same situation, maybe not your whole life, but there's a particular part of your life that somebody like, oh, I'm going through that same thing. And the beautiful part about it though, and I think the same way, is, so I have this so I think my vision is wild. It's like 150 years from now, there's going to be some individual 150 years ago going through the Google archive or the podcast archive or the AI bot sitting there, and they're asking their AI friend, or maybe they are an AI. They're probably, at that point, people are just, part AI, part. And like, I want to pull something up on a specific topic, and then one of our podcasts show up, and something we say and in some clip motivates that person 150 years from now to do something amazing and changes the world. Could happen, right?
I agree. It could. And that's what is exciting about it. And you don't necessarily that's where the discipline comes in, and you realize that, yeah, you've got really a mission to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Like you said, is everyone going to be a home run? No. But at the same time, you do your reps. You go through the motions, you do your reps, and you meet new people just like exactly. Build up those muscles. You meet people just like you, have fantastic conversations, and just look forward to future conversations. And that's really what it's all about, is the connection with the human being, right? There's no better way today to do that than through this format. Whether people can learn about me. I've shared my whole life story here in about an hour, that, if people will, hopefully when they meet me, they'll know about me, right? And they can do that. And they've got to be able to have the courage to step into that, knowing that somebody needs that message and that voice. When I was first encouraged to start my podcast, and I won't go too long here, but just one story to maybe encourage folks to think about their own message. You have
1 more hour. That's it.
1 more hour. Okay. If for those that are hanging on this long, here's maybe another nugget that somebody shared with me that really got me motivated to start my podcast. And they said that if you had a platform where you had 10 people show up in a room that you could share your message, would you do it? And my answer was yes. He says, well, what happens if it's only 5 people? Would you still show up? If you had an engagement and 5 people were counting on you to show up every week or every day or every whatever your format is, would you feel like that's an important thing? And when you really think about it, if you can impact those few people, 10, 20, I mean, it could branch out then into hundreds and more than that, right? But just knowing that you have the opportunity to share a message, your stories, right? Because we all have our own stories and our own backgrounds that could possibly impact, like you said, this 150 years from now, somebody might be going through something. It's like going through that thought experiment, trying to find the lead the field quote, right? The luck. When preparedness meets opportunity. And maybe someday, right, we'll show up in a Google, because you did the Google search. Maybe it didn't show up then, but maybe it will now. And it'll refer back to us here on this episode. Yeah. But who knows? And then it just becomes fun. If you make it fun and don't get too caught up on the stuff, I just would encourage folks that if they feel like they have a message to share, it needs to be shared. And folks are looking for people just like you to pour into them.
There you go. So, Randy, if somebody wants to reach out to you, learn more about what you do, obviously the podcast, where do we find that podcast, but also where do you hang out on the World Wide Web? Do you like LinkedIn? Are you a LinkedIn guy? You're a Twitter guy or X?
Yeah, I'm on all of the different platforms. I can't say that I'm, leaning one way or the other on any of them, but I am. You can find me anywhere. I've really try to make it as simple as possibly can. So it's Randy Wilson Online. So if you look for Randy Wilson Online, Instagram, LinkedIn, as you mentioned, YouTube. So the podcast gets done in video as well. So you can find me on YouTube as well. Actually, there you can just search for @Randy Wilson, just my name itself. I was able to get that. Nice. That name for myself. But yeah, exactly. That's pretty cool. But the point being is that, I'm pretty much anywhere and everywhere. If people want to email me, they can email me directly at randy@randywilsononline.com. That's my direct email. And let me know if you have questions, anything that I shared. If you have questions, concerns, not sure about things that are going on in your own personal life, maybe you've got parts of my story resonates with yours. I'd be more than happy to have a discussion and see how I might be able to help. I've got a book. I was part of a collaboration book called Think Big that I'd be willing to offer folks a digital copy of that book if they'd be interested in having that as well. But you can also email me there at randy@randywilsononline.com, and I'll get that digital version over there to you also. The Rich Mind podcast, you can find that in all the podcast platforms. That's probably my number one thing that I'm really focusing on today. That's where I've found a lot of joy doing the podcast, and I'm having a ton of fun doing it. Just searching for the Rich Mind podcast with Randy Wilson. You should be able to find that on any platform. And I would, love to have anybody, if they've resonated with what I've shared today, come on and take a listen, see if I might be able to help them moving forward. It'd be a lot of fun.
I love it. You are going to change. You're going to make a lot of minds rich. I feel it. I see it happening for you. It
all starts within. It all starts on the inside, folks. If you realize that, right, everything starts on the inside, and then obviously it gets shown up on your outside environment. So I'm sorry to cut you off there, but you're right.
You're the guest. Honestly, the guest can cut me, the host off anytime. I'm here for you. Like, I'm here for the audience and for you. I'm just here to facilitate this whole thing. All right, we're gonna go now. All right. Thanks again for joining us, Randy. It's been a lot of fun. Till next time.
Appreciate it. This has been a great time, Matt. Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.